right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Ms. Jackson.
So welcome to the Harper Park Skype session with, I'll come over here so you can see me.
See, yeah, that's the
Hello.
microphone right there.
All right, so welcome to the Harper Park Skype session with archaeologist Dr. Alexandra Jones. Dr. Jones is a teacher, an archaeologist, and she's the founder of an organization called Archaeology in the Community. So first, we're going to spend a few minutes hearing from her, and then you'll have the opportunity to ask a bunch of questions. All right? All right, thank you, Dr. Jones.
Well, good morning.
Good morning.
So like your teacher said, I'm Dr. Jones. I am an archaeologist. I've been doing archaeology for, I guess, 15 years now. I started out when I was in college. So most people normally ask me, like, how did you become an archaeologist? I didn't know about archaeology when I was your age, unfortunately. And I did grow up in DC. My teachers never talked about it or anything else. I found out about it from going to the Smithsonian. So I went to an exhibition there. My mom worked there and basically found out that all the artifacts that were there were uncovered by archaeologists, and it was something that I was kind of excited about and wanted to do myself. So I went to college and I went on my first excavation. My first excavation was conducted in Chumchuc Mill, Mexico. Does anybody know where that's located? No. It's quite a ways away in Mexico, but it's the Mayan region. So I was able to learn about the ancient Maya from excavating down there. I went and basically like any other school, I learned how to excavate. I learned what archaeology was, and I became really excited and decided it's what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I went back to school and got a degree in archaeology, and basically just I kind of never looked back. I've gone from there. I've done work in Jamaica. I've worked in Belize. I've conducted archaeology, let me see, in Maryland, in DC. I've done a little bit in Virginia as well. I'm what's known as a Chesapeake, which is the region we live in, the Chesapeake region archaeologist, and I am a Caribbeanist. So I also do and work with students in St. Croix as well as Belize. So I do a little bit of international stuff. I'm not a traditional archaeologist, as most people think. Most people think archaeologists only dig in the dirt. I mix two things that I love very much, and that's archaeology and teaching. So 8 years ago, I started the company that I work with now. I'm the founder of it, which basically teaches kids all about archaeology. So I travel around the United States as well as I go internationally, and I work with kids and I teach them all about archaeology and all of the cool things we do. In addition to that, I'm a university professor. So I also teach college students about archaeology. So I guess I have a few questions for you. Does anybody know what archaeology is? Can anybody answer that question for me? Okay, I'll let one of the teachers.
Talk into the microphone. Right, stand there and talk.
Archaeology is basically the study to see what people did in the past.
Oh, perfect. Yes, yes. My next question. Has anybody ever gone to an archaeology site? Just raise your hand. Okay, I see a few hands up. Has anybody ever watched a TV show about archaeology? Okay, cool. I see a few more hands up. Well, just on that note, just something smaller. A few years ago, I worked with PBS. So everybody knows the PBS station. And I worked with a show called Time Team America. And so with the TV show, I traveled with the TV show around the United States looking at different archaeological sites. But my job was pretty cool in that each place the show aired and did and featured an archaeological site, I also went and did a program for kids there. So everywhere the show was, the kids got to meet the staff of the TV show and see the archaeology site, but the kids in that area also got to learn about the show. So being an archaeologist, I've been able to do some really cool things, far more than what people just think archaeologists do. So I've been able to teach, I've worked with television shows, I've excavated sites, and then I've met some really, really cool people in kind of traveling around and going to different places as well. So with that said, um, I'll defer to the teachers, but does anybody have any questions for me?
Right, we do. So let's see how we want to. Do you have a bureau card, or you know what your question is? Yeah. All right. Well, some of these questions have been screened and some haven't. So we'll see how this goes. Okay, go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
How much money do you make every year? I was just wondering.
All right. Have a seat. Yes.
Okay, so it varies. If you are a junior archaeologist, like you just went to field school, you can make anywhere, you can do archaeology part-time, which is kind of cool. So some people, if you want during the summer, you can do it as a part-time job. You can make anywhere from $5,000 to $20,000 a year. Once you get your PhD, that goes up, or excuse me, your master's degree, that goes up significantly. So you can earn anywhere from 40 to 60,000. Once you get your doctorate and you become a doctor in archaeology, that can change from anywhere to 50 to 80,000 a year. Did that answer your question?
What class are you from? Biggie or just Jackson? All right. Do I have a Miss Biggie question? All right. Okay, go ahead. All right.
Where is like your business located?
In DC. So I'm located in Washington, DC. And then I work with kids from DC, Maryland, Virginia, sometimes Delaware, and sometimes Pennsylvania.
Do we have downstairs? We'll try to alternate teachers.
Have you ever found a journal somewhere and
Hold it, Melanie.
okay. Have you ever found a journal somewhere, and if you have, whose was it and what was written in it?
So actually I did. I'm glad you asked. At my first archaeology site in Maryland, I found the journal of a fraternal society. What happened was back in 1920, the place where they used to meet, their meeting house, had burned down. And it just so happened that in all of the rubble when I was going and excavating, part of their journal survived. So I took the journal, and it has all of the information of every time they met, who was there, who paid money, what people passed away, what people they helped as far as pay doctor's bills for. And then I took the journal to the Historical Society in Montgomery County, because the site was located in Montgomery County, Maryland. So you can actually go now and see the journal that I found.
All right, Miss Jackson's class. Do you want to pick? Okay. We'll just alternate classes, okay? So
What
Jackson,
types of artifacts do you find the most at sites?
Ooh, okay, it depends. Thinking about when archaeologists excavate, we excavate sites that people lived in every day. So thinking about the things that you use every day, and those are kind of the things that we find all the time. So if it is a site, let's say somewhere here in Maryland, Virginia, or DC, and it was in the 1800s, we would find brushes, toothbrushes, combs, sewing needles, wood, things people use to eat with, utensils. So kind of think about all the things that we use every day. Those are the things that archaeologists actually find at sites, are the things that people use every day, because it tells us about what are some of the most important things, are some of the things that people find the most important are things like our toothbrush. Can you imagine trying to go 5 or 10 days without brushing your teeth? So yeah, so everyday things that we use is so important.
What's your favorite type of site to excavate?
Hmm. Let's see. Um, I like remote sites, sites where we don't really know that much information about. And for me, the reason why is because it's one of those things that really excites me as an archaeologist. Oftentimes when I'm excavating, I'm the first person to see or touch something since it was put down. So thinking about things that have been buried for 100 to 1,000 years. So the more hidden a site is, the more exciting it is for me because I'm the person who gets to uncover and tell the story of people that we don't know that much about.
All right, here comes the next one.
Have you ever found an actual American Indian, like a bone or a full skeleton of an Indian?
Yes. Um, the catch with that is that we have laws in the United States that do not allow archaeologists to excavate burial grounds without permission. I was excavating a site out on the eastern shore of Maryland, and we were looking for a blacksmith house. And for you who don't know what a blacksmith is, it's the person that makes things made of metal for farms a long time ago. So we were looking for a blacksmith house, and as we were digging, we basically dug into a burial that we uncovered was a Native American site, burial site. So we had to stop. And according to law, you have to call the police so the police can say that, it wasn't a recent death. And once they say that, then they call in the state archaeologist. And the state archaeologist came in and basically just cleared it so that we reburied, basically put the dirt back over the person and left them there. We didn't excavate them because we didn't want to move the burial or anything because it didn't have anything to do with our research. But I have found a person before.
Taking turns. You already went. No, sorry, we're taking turns.
How do you determine the age of the artifacts you find?
Oh. So we have a number of dating techniques in which we use to figure out like chronology and how old something is. So the first thing we do is as we excavate, we date the layers of dirt. So depending on how old the layer of dirt was, we have an estimated guess around what year it came from. The next thing we do is depending on how modern the artifact is, okay, for example, if we see the smart water bottle, you actually can go online and Google smart water and figure out what year they made the design and what year they came up with it. So we can kind of do the same thing with certain things like Coca-Cola bottles, all of those different Coca-Cola cans you see. There's a website that tells you what year Coca-Cola made the design. So we can also use the internet. Another thing we do for organic materials or things that once were living is we can carbon date it. Everything that dies releases carbon in it at the same rate. So by taking a piece of it and testing it to see how much carbon is in it, we can figure out how long ago this animal, food, wood, or person died by carbon dating them.
Okay, where are we now? I've dealt with okay.
In your opinion, which type of artifacts you found are most interesting?
I think all artifacts are really interesting. One of the things that people don't realize is an artifact by itself is not important. It doesn't tell us anything. It's when you take all of the artifacts together and you look at the context in which you find them that you understand about the artifact. So for me, I think all artifacts are equally important because all of them together tell the story of people.
Okay. Oh, Piggy. Ariana?
What's one of the coolest things you found?
Let me think. The coolest thing, well, I often get asked by students, did I ever find gold? No, we normally never find gold, and I mean never. However, I was excavating in a site once where I found a gold plate. It just so happened the people that had owned the property had one, and there was a story within the family. Somehow it had got lost years and years ago. But basically, while we were excavating, we found it under one of the houses on the site. So for me, I thought it was kind of cool because something that we never ever find, I actually got to find, which was a little thin gold plate.
Did you get to keep it? What? Lucas, you have to wait your turn, buddy.
What kinds of tools do you use?
Oh, awesome question. So we use a trowel. If anybody has ever seen a picture of somebody laying bricks, they have kind of this little tool with a pointed edge. And what I can do is take a picture and send it to your teacher. But it has a little pointed edge, and it looks like a little triangle, and they pick the semen up and rub it on the brick. Well, as archaeologists, that's what we excavate with. We don't use shovels. We use a really small tool, and we excavate super slowly. And then when we find things, we use a paintbrush to brush it off, to get the dirt off. Sometimes, so that we don't destroy the artifact because it's really, really fragile, we use a dental pick to kind of move dirt around and away from it. We also use measuring tapes because math is really, really important in archaeology, and we measure a lot of things. So we use measuring tapes. We use, let me think what else. We use notebooks and pens and paper. One of the things about archaeology is we're the only science that destroys everything. So if you think about it, as an archaeologist, I can never put every particle of dirt right back how I found it. So as a result, we have to take a lot of notes, and we have to take a lot of pictures. So a camera is equally as important at an archaeology site.
What are some of the coolest weapons you found, if you found any?
I found the flint from a gun before. So I found like a little piece of a really, really old gun. And that was pretty cool because honestly, you never find weapons. It's one of those things, and when you think about archaeology, we're the science of things that people have left behind. And people rarely leave really important things behind. And weapons are one of those things that people really find important because you have to think, if you're out hunting or you're at war, you need your weapon to protect yourself or to get food. So for me, finding that little piece of the gun was pretty cool because I never get to find weapons.
How many archaeology sites have you been to?
Okay, wait, come back. I have a question for you. Okay. Okay. I didn't see you. All right. So my question for you is, how many archaeology sites have I visited, or how many archaeology sites have I worked on? Which one?
Worked on.
Okay. Let's see. I'm gonna have to pull out my fingers and count. Seven. I've worked on seven archaeology sites. Oh wait, 8. I'm sorry, 8 archaeology sites.
Do you find something in every dig?
Yes. It may not always be the something that we're looking for. So thinking about it, people have inhabited most of the earth at some point, and people have lived everywhere. So I've actually excavated an archaeology site where we were looking for one thing and didn't find anything associated with that. But instead, we found out about the people who had lived there 80, 100 to 200 years before instead.
How do you know where to dig?
Oh, that's a very good question. Okay, so as archaeologists, we love people to think that we're super smart. We're really not that smart. So instead, it's more like being a detective, a mystery detective. What we know is at some point in time, a group of people lived somewhere. So then what we have to do is basically treat it just like a detective, like any other mystery. We have to figure out who are these people, where did they live, when did they live, and basically how did they live in this place. So one of the cool things that we get to do is we travel to places, and the first thing we start doing is we talk to the oldest people in the community, and we ask them questions. Did you ever know about these people? Did you ever hear stories about these people? Once they give us kind of what information they have locally from their local stories, what we then do is we go to the local library or archives, and we start pulling up maps. So we find maps to see if on any of these old historic maps, do they tell you where people live or what area might have been inhabited by people. Then we go to the library section and we start looking up old journals and books that were written by people on this area as well. And we basically, from all of that information, get a general idea of where an archaeological site might be located. The next thing that we do is we go out and we conduct a preliminary survey. So we go out to the area, and the area can be as big as 3 football fields. So what we do is we do shovel test pit tests. So we take a shovel and we dig about like 1 meter to 2 meters down. We dig and we see if we find anything. If we don't, we walk 5 meters directly in front and we do the same thing. And what will happen is you'll see like 10 archaeologists set up, and it almost looks like a piece of grid paper. So all of the little corners of the squares on a piece of graph paper, that's where an archaeologist would dig a hole. So we don't dig everywhere. We just dig in a certain amount of distance away from each other to kind of make a graph paper kind of grid on the ground. And once we do that, we figure out wherever we found the most artifacts, that's more where people more likely would have lived or done an activity. So then what we do is we then go in and conduct a full excavation of that area based on that.
What is the largest site you have worked on?
Chunchik Mill would have been the largest site. So it was a whole town, ancient Maya town, and we were excavating and working on it to see where the people lived versus how far they were from like the marketplaces and where what would be the stores now would have been located. But it was a whole town that we excavated.
What's the oldest thing you found?
The oldest, let's see, thing. I don't know that I would call it a thing necessarily. The oldest thing I've ever, or the oldest object I've ever excavated was an ancient Maya house. So the house itself was the oldest thing that I ever excavated. And it dated back about 12,000 years.
What do you usually go look for at sites?
Everything. We are interested in anything and everything because it gives us information about how people used the land and how people lived.
How long do you usually take at a site, and what's the longest time you spent at one?
Wow. Okay, so to excavate a site or one small part of a site takes months. And normally archaeologists are at a site anywhere from 2 to 5 years. sometimes up to as long as 20 years, especially when you're dealing with towns, because you got to think about all the areas. Think about if we were excavating the city you live in and how many buildings and roads and stores and schools. So it can take a very long time to get through the whole site. The longest that I've ever been at one particular site was 2 years.
Someone who has not asked a question, we're going to go with just original questions. Go ahead. People who haven't got a chance.
How many people do you work with?
Oh, okay, wait. Now I have a question. Oh, okay, wait. Now I have a question. Work with at a site or work with when I teach children? Okay. At a site, normally there is anywhere from 5, if it's a slow day, to 40 people at an archaeology site.
What project are you working on right now?
Currently, I am working on a project in St. Croix, and it was a hospital site where enslaved people lived. So we're excavating the enslaved village of a hospital site in St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. And I'm running a program where not only are we excavating, but I am training high school kids on how to conduct archaeology as well. So if they want to go to college for archaeology, they'll already know how to.
If you ever find any object, who is the first person you give it to?
Oh, okay. It depends. It depends. So as an archaeologist, we are not allowed. It is against the law. We can go to jail and we can be fined up to $1 million for keeping an artifact. I don't think most people know this. So it is super, super, super important as you find artifacts that you take them, they go to the lab and they're processed. Depending on where the site is, we have an agreement with the state and the government. So some sites go to the state or the local university museum. Some artifacts go to the state repository. And for governments, we have to work out who is the entity that the government will approve for us to send artifacts.
What type of education did you need?
So there's a couple steps to become an archaeologist. The first thing is you have to go to college. So that's number one and most important. The next thing is you have to go what we call a field school. And a field school is literally you go out into the field and you're trained by archaeologists how to conduct archaeology. A lot of times people do that while they're also in college. The next thing you need to do, depending on what type of archaeologist you are, you go and get your master's degree. So some archaeologists only work in the lab. Some archaeologists only specialize in certain things. So if you're interested in plants and animals, you go and you get your master's degree in botany for plants or a faunal for animal bone analysis. Some people like me, I really like, I like dead people. And I like bones. So you can get a master's degree in osteology, which is the study of human bones. Now, if you want to do and run your own site and be the head person, you then have to go to school and get your doctorate or a PhD. So once you get that, you then can go and start your own archaeology sites and run your own sites.
What type of clothing did you find, and which one is your favorite?
Can you repeat that question just so we can hear it?
Oh, I found, okay.
What type of clothing did you find, and which one is your favorite?
Excellent.
Okay, so two things. I found leather from a leather shoe. And the reason why it was so cool is because I actually found the top of the shoe. So even though it was flat, I saw the holes and it still had the string from whoever had tied the shoe up. It's just the sole was missing. So I thought that was really cool to actually find a tied up shoe. And then the other thing I found was a piece of a military uniform. So you actually got to see the actual uniform, and there was still a button on part of the uniform jacket that I found.
How do you keep the artifacts safe after you find them?
So we have a group of people who are called curators. And what their job is to basically preserve and maintain the artifacts. A lot of curators work in our labs and work at museums. And their job is to look at the material and figure out what is the best way to keep it and preserve it through perpetuity. So that means forever. So sometimes that's putting it in plastic bags that are acid-free. Sometimes that's putting it in a case where the temperature is regulated, the humidity is regulated, and that you're also watching how much moisture is getting to it. So for example, papers. Papers have to be preserved in an environment where there's almost no moisture. So they'll put it in special cases in order to do that. So if you think about when you go to the museums and how you see books and they're in that case, oftentimes if you look really hard, you'll see in the back of it this little gauge, and that little gauge is judging what the temperature is inside that box and how much moisture is in that box. But it's normally like a really small little gauge about this big.
Oh, did you go already? Okay.
Anyone that hasn't asked a question yet?
All right, let's go with 2 more questions, and then we're going to have to probably wrap it up, okay? So, okay, Lucas, go ahead. He's going to feel really deprived if he doesn't get the question. Better be busy.
What's the most valuable thing you found?
Ooh, the most valuable thing. Wait. Okay, come back. I see you sit down. Come back. I have a counter question. Do you mean money-wise, or do you mean valuable as in
Money,
to,
and did
like,
you ever
people?
think about keeping it?
Okay. I would say the most valuable thing that I've ever found was the gold plate. And no, I've never thought about keeping anything, mostly because I don't want to go to jail. I kind of like being free.
All right, this question and one last one, and then we're going to say a big thank you.
Have you ever gone to Cactus Hill?
Oh.
Oh, no, I've never been to Cactus Hill.
You look eager. Make it a good one.
When you take artifacts to the lab, how do you make sure they don't break?
Oh, good question. Okay, so what happens is, as archaeologists, when we get our artifacts, we put them in plastic bags. If we know the artifact is super fragile when we're excavating, it depends. Like, we'll wrap it sometimes in foam. We'll sometimes put plastic or paper or bubble wrap around it. And we put it in these, I'm trying to think what those like staple boxes, kind of those boxes that people put files in. Those are the boxes that we carry it to the lab with. And every day that we excavate, literally that very same day, all of the artifacts with all of the notes go directly to the lab. So they're never kind of out and sitting out. It's normally we excavate them, and then within maybe an hour's time, they go an hour to maybe 5 hours. They go directly to the lab.
Let's thank Dr. Jones.
You're welcome.
We had a great time. Thank you for spending part of your day with us.